koutou, no mai hoki mai ki te Flight of the Next podcast. So welcome to the Flight of the Next podcast. Holly is out sick today, so I am filling in her wake. My name's Alex. I'm in Te Whanganui-a-Tara. I'm joined with Erin Lim in Taumaki Makaurau, Auckland, and Danny Avis in Gadigal Land, Sydney. So today on the agenda are the women's win against Adelaide. We finally got a win. My McCutcheon with the goal. I think we'll start with that. So there were kind of some wholesale changes for the Phoenix. Paul Eiffel definitely using kind of the squad and kind of dropping some players who, on paper, you would have thought are some of our strongest players this season. So Ingham, Tanaka, Wall and Ferguson came into the starting 11 for Jale, Main, Elliott and Longo. Longo obviously forced out with injury. Jale and Main are kind of the two surprising ones for me in that list, because at the start of the season, I would have thought they would have been kind of best attacking threats. And Ingham coming in for them, especially, who we haven't seen much of in the past. Danny, how do you think she played?
I thought all the changes were, you're right, they were sort of bold changes, but I think we needed something to happen like that after the last game where we really created nothing. And although I agree with you, I think Jolly and Main are two very good players and should be, really go-to players. They didn't really create anything in the last game, and you can look back at a couple of games beforehand where they haven't really worked that well together. And I think I look at it more of the point of view of who did he bring in rather than who did he take off. Because the people that did bring in, they've all come on as subs in the last three games and have all made the team better. And if you're a player and you come on and you perform well and yet you don't get picked, eventually, if that carries on happening, you've got to think, well, what am I doing in this team? So I think Temple probably had to reward those players, Lara Wall, Ferguson, Tanaka, with a start because they've come on and they've done everything they needed to do. And we needed a shake-up. It was a bit of a bold choice, but I think we can see from the result that it worked. I think the people who came on played really well. Ingham hasn't had much game time at all, I think, but I thought she did pretty well down the left. Ferguson looked really bright up front. Did very well there. It was pretty hot, but she still managed to run around. Tanaka as well. Very lively, and her set pieces, I think, were really good, and that's something maybe we've missed when she's not on the pitch, the corners and from dead balls. We've always been quite strong with that, with Nikki Foster in the previous couple of seasons. She's not here now, but Tanaka looks like she could do something there. And then Lara Wall in defence, I think, just makes us just look stronger back there. As well as she pushed forward a little bit as well. So I think the changes worked really well. I think needed to be made. A bold choice anyway, because if it would have fallen apart, then again, as you say, people will be saying, hey, Grace Jale, she's a football third, why isn't she playing? She's up and coming, why isn't she playing? But I think it was justified and it worked. And I would say, they'd probably keep their position for the next game.
Yeah, I think with some of the players that we had out, we have Blake out now for basically the whole season. Longo's been out for this game with the head knock. That some of these changes kind of had to happen as a reaction to that as well. We know we were going to have to pull in, Lara Wall into the start to replace Lake there. And she's been coming on as a sub recently and just, I think, been one of the better players every time she's come on. So it was kind of good to see her get the start. And then I think just some of the shuffling around of the team, losing Longo in the midfield is quite a big loss for us, because I think that when she's on the field, she has that kind of leadership and that skill to really help the midfield to do what it needs to do. So I think with her out, they needed to try to switch it up a bit. And I think it was partly because of those injuries and partly just because that last game that we played was kind of shocking and needed something different, needed something new. And I think playing all the visas at once is something that the fans have been begging Paul Temple to do. I've seen everyone just say, start Tanaka, start Ferguson and, see what happens. And I think that it did pay off. And I think that Villau as well has really improved a lot in such a short space of time. The first game that she played, I was kind of like, oh, what has happened here? But I think now she's actually kind of batshit crazy almost. She comes out and she's just going to take a hit. She's 2 games in a row now. A player's just completely come in and collided with her. And it happened again in Unite round, and she just kind of stood back up again and just kept playing on to the end. And so it's really good to see, and it's confidence out the back really helps to bring confidence everywhere on the pitch. And I'm super stoked that we got this win in Australia. I think it was the 7th time in our history that we've gotten a win in Australia. So super happy with the result there.
Yeah. I want to talk about the goal for a moment. I think, Danny, you mentioned it. We haven't been the best at set pieces since Mickey Foster left. And it's not really what I was expecting from Olivia Ferguson when she first signed for the club. I was kind of expecting more of a finisher, more instead of like a player who can set up goals. But the ball comes in, it's kind of a bit of a scramble in the box. Olivia Ferguson, I think she wants to kind of whack at top bins, but she kind of mishits the ball and ends up just skewing off somewhere, and Maya McCutcheon kind of comes in, diving header, kind of Louis Fenton-esque, and just hammers it into the back of the net, and the celebrations were pretty wonderful from the team. You guys were there. I think it was a big weight off the shoulder for the team, especially since they haven't scored since, round 1. So how did it feel?
It was awesome. It was great to get a goal. And as you say, it did feel like a big relief. It's like a break of tension. We'd had a lot of them play in the first half. I think we had something like 15 shots in the first half, but a lot of them weren't great shots, it has to be said. And, that is down to Ferguson. It is down to Wynnum. Wynnum's not the strongest shot, as we know. She had a couple of chances. Ferguson, I would expect to do better. You're right, the goal came from what would have been pretty embarrassing. She had basically a goal to aim at, and it would have gone quite badly wide if McCutcheon hadn't jumped in. So we probably should have had more goals in terms of the amount of possession, the amount of attacking, the amount of shots we had. So for that to go in, and just before half-time, sort of 3 minutes into the 1 minute added on, as a lot of Adelaide fans keep saying, was just great. And so if we hadn't have scored in that half, I would have been really scared that, they come back, they score one, it would be just like a game all over again, and we just can't get that win. So it was a bit of break of tension, and it was down our end where all the fans, we were all clustered in one little corner. And yeah, all the players came across. They seemed very, very happy, as they did after a match. But yeah, it obviously meant a lot to them. You could see that quite clearly.
Yeah, and the next match is against Brisbane Roar. We've got a week off. I'm pretty sure that game is in Wellington at Porirua Park. Kick off 4 p.m, so that kind of looks like it. Brisbane Roar have looked very good this season. They've just been the Wanderers 4-0, and they've been Perth Glory 3-0. They're coming off the back of 3 wins. How do you guys think this game's going to go?
Yeah, I think Raw are a bit of a surprising dark horse team that have come through kind of from nothing. They didn't make playoffs last year, and I don't actually really know what's happened to them in the off-season, but yeah, coming through with being top of the table coming into the next round is pretty impressive from them. And I think a lot of that can probably come down to Yallop in the on the pitch there. I think that she's, from watching their game in the weekend, she was kind of the player they were looking for, and the one who could keep the ball, distribute the ball, and even and score the goals as well. And so if we can kind of contain her, which hopefully we can if we keep that strong midfield game, then I think we have a good chance of beating them. They have their left back, I think her name is Chelsea Blissett. She was actually pretty decent as well. I was watching her, she was keeping that ball out on the left and beating players with it, and being really calm on the ball. But they had a centre-back who was a bit dodgy. So she was playing passes, straight to the opposition. She was losing the ball. She was snacking the ball out for corners when she had so much more time to do something with it. So hopefully that's in the game plan, that we can exploit some of these weaknesses that were very, very obvious in the weekend and come away with some points from this game.
It will be, I think Temple will be looking to carry on a bit of what we did against Adelaide in terms of just the solidity at the back and in midfield. Certainly for the whole of the first half and for a bit of the second half, we really sort of controlled possession and controlled the game. The midfield two of McCutcheon and Brazendale seemed to work really well. Laura Wall in the back, again, seemed to solidify us at the back a lot. And Adelaide are a decent side, decent attacking side, so to keep them down to few chances in the first half, certainly, loosened up a bit in the second, was good. If we can do that against Brisbane and keep it goalless at the half, and then, things to play for. I do think the attack, as we said, they've probably got some points to prove, certainly in terms of finishing and scoring, but we are at home. And, we've got a bit of competition up there up front now. I would imagine we'd start with pretty much the same side. But, Jale and Main, they're going to be pushing to come on. They're decent. So that's good. I think probably the week that the team has spent in Sydney probably worked well, just in terms of teamwork. I don't know really what their schedule is when they're in Wellington, but, a whole week together following the Newcastle game and this game can't have done them any harm. So hopefully, it means we'll start coming together better as a team, as come together now for the season going forward. So reasonably hopeful against Brisbane, but Brisbane are tough. They put 4 past, I think, Western Sydney Wanderers, the game after ours in the United round. So they're the team to beat at the moment. I think we're capable of getting a result, but it'll be a tough game.
Yeah. And so I think we'll move on to the men now. So the men also grinding out a 1-0 win over top of the table, Melbourne Victory. I don't know about you guys, but I'm stoked with this result. I don't think the game was, that entertaining, but I guess the fact is I was really, really hot. I wasn't there, but, I heard 26 degrees. That's bloody hot for Wellington. Little to no crowd also. So I think this took a home game away from us as well. And, I think crowds kind of spur on teams more than they get credit for. I think that's kind of when people compare the A-League to European football, I think that's one of the biggest differences that they're seeing is actually the differences in crowds and how well or how much that kind of affects the players. So, no crowd, which we'll talk about later, about Unite round. Danny, you were there. How did it feel?
Look, the result was amazing. And you say the small crowd, but it's probably one of the biggest Wellington away crowds we've had for a few seasons. It's probably almost as big as I can remember. Maybe the Melbourne semi-final last year was pretty big, but we had an entire, probably 2 bays. And Melbourne had what seemed to be 4 or 5 blokes on a stag trip to Sydney, I think. So we were massively in the ascendancy, even though big stadium. It was actually a really good atmosphere where we were. So I know it may not look like on TV, but we had a lot of fun. The game itself, let's be honest, we were pretty lucky to get away with it. They were on top. They had more chances. Certainly in the first half, they cut through our channels down past Hughes and Sheridan too often for comfort, although we didn't let too many big chances go our way. But Chiefy, again, in Chiefy we trust. He switched things around, looks like every 5 minutes. I could never tell whether Sheridan was playing on the left or the right, whether Wootton was central or he was left. So he moved stuff around, which, I don't know if you saw his press conference afterwards, but genius, absolutely brilliant. Have a watch of it if you can. And we got the result. We only had a couple of chances, but Costa, even with a strapped up leg, put the goal in. And I love a 1-0 victory against Victory. Brilliant.
Yeah, I think we knew that it probably wasn't going to be the most exciting game going into this. I don't think even last season we had that much action against Melbourne Victory when we played them. It was always kind of a bit boring most of the time, to be honest. But I think it probably didn't help that we had both fullbacks out with injury, so we had to shuffle around that back line. That's going to, take out our usual attacking channels that we do. We have Payne running up and whipping in crosses, and we don't have that. And so we knew that the strategy was going to be different. And it was always going to be different against Melbourne Victory anyway, but it was just going to be a completely different style of football that we've seen the past few weeks. It paid off. I found it interesting that Piscopo didn't start for Victory. I think they had Azani starting instead, which I feel like, knowing the Knicks effect, Piscopo probably could have scored a goal against us because it's always the way. But it was kind of good to not see him in the starting lineup. And then, seeing a Marco Rojas assist and Acosta Barbaros's goal was just flashback to prime Phoenix and a bit of a blast from the past, to be honest. So stoked with the 3 points. Stoked to get a win against Victory in Australia. Doesn't happen often, so celebrate it for as long as I can.
Yeah, I was a bit happy with no Piscopo. I think he was injured. They mentioned that on the pre-match broadcast. So kind of lucky for us because Daniel Arzani doesn't really have any end products. I think the main thing in this game, or the decisive factor, was our tactics. In the first half, we set out in a 5-3-2 as we have most season, and I think our wing-backs were kind of isolated. So we switched that up at half-time. We subbed on Corbin Piper for Oscar Van Hatten, and Oscar Van Hatten didn't really have the best game. He was there were a lot of balls being played to him on that right side, and he kind of wasn't really getting to a lot of them. So we switched to a back four. Sheridan went in at left back. And, we talk about how Victory had most of the ball. And turns out that was actually, by design. I think everything the Phoenix do at the moment is by design, from the brilliant mind of Chiefy. A quote from him in his press conference was, "We give teams the ball when we feel like it's not their strength." And he mentioned how Victory scored most of their goals on the counter-attack. So kind of giving him the ball, he didn't think they could create much. And to be fair, they didn't. I think they only had, maybe one or two half chances, and Oluwayemi got down well for that. Danny, I see you're peeking to talk here. How do you think the tactics were, and the kind of versatility on the team?
Well, I mean, that's the point I wanted to say. I mentioned Corbin Piper. He comes on at half time. It's effectively his debut. I know he's had a couple of minutes as a sub, but he's never played at this level before. He comes on to play right back, which is, I'm pretty sure, is not his position, in a completely new formation, which we've suddenly invented at half time, or we seem to have suddenly invented at half time. He's up against Daniel Arzani, who may not have end product, but he can dribble past most of the right backs in this league, and he was great. He was just solid. He took it past Arzani a couple of times. He was just really impressive. And I think we forget we've got all these young players. We're assuming Sheridan now is just, part of the furniture. But again, he's 4 or 5 games into his professional career. Hughes is probably 10 games into his professional career. And again, as I said, they did 4 or 5 different, I think Chiefy said they did 5 different formation changes during the game. And these are young players, who not only have to work out all these tactics and do it, but they have to work out, how to actually just kick a ball as well. They're just learning that. It's just deeply impressive, and the way we play. Chiefy blamed a lot of the stodginess, if you like, of the game on the temperature. And it was brutally hot in the sunshine. We were actually in the shade in the stands, but on the pitch it was really hot. You could see how much people were sweating, and the pitch was dry, and you could see that a lot of people were slipping over. Sheridan and Van Hatten in the first half went over numerous times in the bottom right corner, and they weren't the only people from any team to do that. People kept falling over, and a lot of our small passes coming out of the press just weren't reaching other players as well. And it happened with Victory, but we seem to struggle with that more. So we were sort of pressing them once they got across the halfway line. They were sort of doing the same to us. So a lot of the game was sort of Barbarousis and Ishiga and Nagasawa just getting stuck in with their centre backs and their midfielders, and it wasn't great to watch. And then we're trying little small short balls to get out of that press, and quite often we'd fail or they would do it better. So that's why they had more of the ball certainly in the first half. Wasn't a great game to watch. But listening to Chiefy and his press conference and his description of everything that he did throughout the game just gives you such a amazing insight into the mind and what goes on in football. I mean, football fans generally, we just watch a game and we enjoy it. And it's like 4-4-2 or 5-3-2, but just the detail. I don't know whether journalists love Chiefy or hate him, because they ask him a question and maybe they expect something. I need something I can put in a headline or in a little blurb for a tweet or whatever. He gives them a 20-minute lecture On you should have a whiteboard behind him where he goes out here, and that's what he does it. He's such a nerd, and he just loves talking about football, and it's great to watch. I don't know how good it is for the journalists because I really don't know they can really pin that down into a nice, quote. But it's so great to listen to him talk and see how much thought goes into our positioning, and it really gives you a new insight into how much those players have to take on. They're not just chasing the ball, not just going, "Oh, there's a bit of space, I'll run there and see if the ball comes there." Talking about how the goal came on and how he was talking Costa to bring across to double up on Guerrier, that he thought Guerrier was getting a little bit isolated. Really fascinating. I definitely recommend if anyone hasn't heard it, get on the A-League website and listen to the chief press conference because it really gives you a really good insight into how we play as a team and gives you a lot of confidence as well, like we know what we're doing.
Yeah, you speak about that kind of versatility, and a lot of the players we have are really, really young. Matt Sheridan, Isaac Hughes, Nathan Walker, Oscar Van Hedden, and they come out of the academy, and in this Chiefy system, they can play just different positions. Like, I don't know about you, but I play right back, and if I get put on at right wing, I'm completely lost. I've got no idea where I'm meant to be. But these players, it can switch from right back to left back to right wing back, to six, like even up at winger, and they still look like they've played there their entire life. And some coaches we've had in the past, Ufuktale in particular, they're so stubborn with their approach. But Chiefy, he just changes it up every week, and his players seem to get it. I don't know what magic he works in the dressing rooms, explaining all his tactics to these players because it's complicated, but they just get it, and I don't know how.
Yeah, super impressive that they can take that on board. I think also one thing that we saw yesterday as well is they work really hard. Again, as we said, it was really hot. The amount of running that Barbarouses did all game, right through 90 minutes or 94 minutes, whatever it was. He's got a leg that was more strapping than leg if you saw it. So he's always struggling with his knee. And he continued to run everywhere. Just really impressive. Again, for someone who's a bit of an older player now. Kept going right through. He scores in the 82nd minute. Really impressive that, again, they continue to keep going all the way through. So their fitness is there as well. So it's quite impressive. And we haven't really, I don't think we've really clicked yet this season. We haven't really put our first 11 out on the pitch. For various reasons. Rojas is still only sort of 20 minutes a game. Retre's only just come back in. Now we've lost Sutton and Tim Payne. I'm really going to be fascinated to see how we do when we're actually put our first 11 out and we're able to play exactly what Chiefy wants us to play. It's going to be quite exciting.
So I think we'll move on more broadly to Unite Round. Aaron, you flew over to Australia from Auckland. How did you find it?
I thought Unite Round was extremely fun. I haven't actually been to an A-Leagues game in Australia before, so I think that this was a good opportunity for me to go and watch multiple A-League games in Australia in one session, and a good chance for me to get to watch the Phoenix men's and women's as well in the same weekend. It doesn't happen often. It's not happening often this season either, so it was kind of good to catch that as well. I thought that they had some really cool activations and activities at the venues. They had, a lot of free face painting, free airbrush tattoos, free hair braids. There's a shark ninja area where there was lounge chairs and fans to keep out of the heat. There were the vintage T-shirt sellers and I think top bins challenge and a bunch of other things all around the venues as well. And so, yeah, it was super exciting, and I think there's a lot of effort that went into it. It's just such a shame that the crowds weren't there for it. It's, I understand that the first game, the Phoenix game, was on a Friday, and that kicked off at 3:30 or whenever that was. So that was a bit of an awkward time for people to get to. But the game after that, Western Sydney Wanderers were playing, and I think there were about 3 Western Sydney fans that I could see. And Brisbane Roar had 2 different groups of active supporters there cheering on their teams. So, yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's something that can continue, if it will continue. But as a concept, I think that it's a good way to watch football and catch up with people and just enjoy the league as it is.
There's been obviously a lot of talk about it and a lot of criticism about it, people saying it wasn't worth it. I think you can easily see between the people who liked it and the people who didn't like it. Everyone who didn't go and watched it on TV thought it was a bit of a joke and, we don't want to do this again and it didn't look very good. Everyone who went to it really enjoyed it. I don't know a single person who went along to Unite Round and go, this is great, I'll do this again next year. Really enjoyed it. The question, of course, is did enough people go? Did enough people go to enjoy it? They didn't. I think in terms of the women's attendances, it got a higher average attendance per game than a normal A-League round. So potentially you could say, oh, well, that's so good. With the men's, obviously the Sydney Derby pushed that up to 30,000 there, but I still think even with that, I don't really trust their figures, but they say it was the same sort of average per game as a normal A-League round. I'm not sure I believe them. What we've got to remember, I think, for the Unite round, it's not something that the APL is funding or the clubs are funding. This is all funded by the New South Wales Tourism Board as part of their deal to bring the Grand Final to Sydney for 3 years. They did the Grand Final for 1 year, and then the APL said, look, the fans are going to kill us if we don't stop doing this. And so they invented this Unite round. So the metrics on whether it works or not are going to be different depending on who you are. If you're watching on TV, you want to see a full stadium. You're never going to see a full SFS because it holds 44,000 people. You don't even see that for a Sydney Derby. But it doesn't look great when you've got the Phoenix playing Victory and all there is a couple of hundred Phoenix fans in the stadium. So I get that. By that metric, you would say, yeah, this is not a very good idea. The metric that counts are the people who pay for it, I guess, which is Destination New South Wales. Did they get enough people travelling to Sydney or having a positive image of New South Wales and maybe coming there as tourists? Well, we've got one person here who definitely did. But was there enough? My guess is probably not for the amount of money they shelled out. I think they paid something like $4 million a year. So whether they will pay for it next year is another matter, or whether another city in Australia or New Zealand would end up paying for it. I think as a concept, I think it's worth sticking with, and I think it'll take time to get it right. It's a lot better this year than last year, heck of a lot better. I still think there's things they can do to improve it slightly to get more people in. Personally, I think it needs to be more of a football festival rather than focusing on actual games, because you focus on particular games and then some people just go for that game and then leave. I know quite a lot of Sydney FC fans that just went to the Derby and then left, rather than, well, why didn't you go an hour and a half earlier and watch Brisbane versus Adelaide, which was a cracking match, Why not do that? I think the women's games were more likely to have people just hanging around and watching a couple of games. So I think there's things they can do to improve it again. It was much more improved this year than last year. I think it's worth sticking with if they can find someone to help fund it, or if the APL can fund it themselves. And I guess for the people who didn't think it was really good, then just come along if you can, because it's a lot of fun when you get over here. It's a good weekend of football. If you enjoy football, you'll enjoy it if you can.
Yeah, I think there's lots of people online saying it's not a very good idea, but they kind of say that it's not something that you'd see in another country where football is kind of the top sport. But I think that's what makes the game kind of special or kind of different in Australia and New Zealand. It's that kind of togetherness about it, and especially in women's football. And I like what you said, Aaron, about how it's a good away day or away weekend for fans, especially from New Zealand, because I'm not going to fly out to Australia to catch one, maybe two games of the Wellington Phoenix if I'm lucky, because that's bloody expensive. And then you've got the Unite round, you can catch all the games. So, it's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 away trips combined. I struggled to see how the APL are going to continue it next year without that money from New South Wales, because as you said, the crowd numbers weren't good, and they actually had to resort in the end to giving out free tickets to all the games to New Zealanders and just free tickets to all the women's games, full stop. So I think kind of one of the main ways that they could make money is kind of selling flight packages, because if you think about it, all that money in flights just goes to the airlines, and I think the APL, it's a market that they could capitalize on, selling kind of packages that include flights, accommodation, tickets, blah, 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 all the lot. But anyway, I think we'll move on to the next game, and this is the Derby again. It's come around pretty quickly. It was only, a month ago that we played the first Derby. in Wellington. This one is in Auckland. It's on the 7th of December. What are you guys expecting?
Well, we watched the Auckland game in the stadium because it was directly after the Phoenix game, and we were all stood with Macarthur fans, of course. On the opposite end of all the hordes and hordes of Auckland fans down the other end. I think I counted 6 Auckland shirts and 1 Inter Milan shirt, but there were a few others down. Auckland are a decent side, and defensively they were very impressive. I thought against Macarthur. Macarthur just didn't have any answers to their defensive press. Their formation out there, they just couldn't break through it, and they tried a lot of different things, and they just couldn't get through it. And so 4 clean sheets Auckland have set now. That's pretty impressive. They've also got, as we know, the best goalkeeper in the league. So going up there, it's going to be tough. It's going to be very tough to score. But the positives are Auckland are also not very good going forward. They didn't really create anything against Macarthur. Macarthur had a lot more chances than them. They had a couple of options. Their goal was a good goal, but it's about their only chance they had. I'd like to think, again, based on the derby that we had at the stadium, where I thought we caused them a lot of problems. Hopefully, we can cause them some more problems now. We've got Rattray in there. If we score, if we score first, I think we can win it, because I don't think they're particularly good going forward. I love to watch Liam Gilliam. I think he's really photogenic and he looks really good going forward, and I enjoy watching him play, but he doesn't actually have that much of an end product. Similarly, a little bit with Logan Rogerson. I don't think they're players we should be too scared of. They've got good players in the midfield and great players in the defence, but if we can score first, I think we can probably hold them out. But if they score against us, we may struggle to get anything back against them, because, as I say, really, really impressive defence. And we know against Poulsen, there's no point shooting from outside the box. He's going to save it. You've got to get a really clear-cut, chance in the middle. So I'm really hopeful, but again, I would probably take a draw away from it.
Yeah, I think I kind of commentated cursed Auckland's win, because I was saying to my partner that Guillermo May guy was looking very average for a Visa player, and then he scored about 3 seconds later. So I think Auckland can thank me for that one, I think. But other than that, it was a back and forth game, actually, that Macarthur-Auckland game, but it was back and forth without much actually happening. Their shots weren't really that threatening at all, and I think that there was just a lot of kind of hidden hope crosses that were going through that no one had a chance to get on the end of, and so it's going to be a good game. It looks like the Mount Smart Go Media Stadium has almost sold out, except for the expensive fancy corporate boxes, and so we can expect a full crowd there, and it'll be very interesting to see how many shirts are yellow and how many shirts are blue in that crowd.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited for it. I'm travelling down with a mate. I think one of the best things for Auckland FC have been their crowds, and I think they've definitely spurred them on. Hopefully there is a large contingent of yellow fever. So that game is on the 7th of December at 5 p.m. Hopefully we get a good crowd there. I'm really, really hoping we see some Aucklanders in yellow shirts, especially. Be there if you can, especially if you live in Auckland. Get all your yellow out. Hopefully we can get the win. I really hope we can get the win. We need those bragging rights back. It was kind of embarrassing for us last time. And I think that wraps up the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Be at that Auckland game, and we'll see you later. Ka kite.